Eisenhower really leaned into the anti-communist rhetoric and really kind of pulled on those themes developed first by Churchill in the Iron Curtain speech of light versus dark, good versus evil, and also relied heavily on a lot of the themes of Truman in terms of we're going to take a strong stance against communist aggression. We're not going to put up with it, right? And he's doing this because he really wants to deter the Soviets and the Chinese from acting. He doesn't really know what their intentions are. There's not good communication happening here. He's not sure if they're about to launch another major offensive, right? He knows these are evil repressive regimes. Okay, so all of that is the context for that. But along with the rhetoric also comes a new policy formation called massive retaliation policy. Okay, and this is where we get into the nuclear arms race really escalating. Okay, and this is under Eisenhower that this is done. This policy is chosen. And the idea was the United States did not have a strong enough army to challenge the Soviet army. It was going to be bigger. They were going to have more soldiers. They, whatever. So we were going to have to rely on building up our nuclear arsenal, where we had a clear advantage. We were ahead of them in the technology and in the numbers of weapons, and we were going to continue escalating our investment in those weapons to be a deterrent from them, acting or on aggression. But of course, then that causes them to be anxious and to build up their arsenals and to be pursuing the same technology. So it leads to this nuclear arms race, which really picks up in the mid 1950s. And it kind of one of the indicators, markers of that new arms race going underway in 1954 is when the Soviets exploded their first atomic bomb, comparable to what the United States had used at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they exploded it in the air above this remote village, Tatski. And there were 45,000 soldiers and civilians in the area, and then a lot more people in the surrounding environs. And the blast is above them. So many of them are not wearing clothing to be protected from the exposure. Okay? And the explosion was kept secret until 1991, but lots of people in the area were suffering illness, blindness, cancer as a result of the radiation exposure. Same year, 1954, I mentioned this last week, was it's three, it's four, is when the United States detonated its first hydrogen bomb, which was 750 times more powerful than the bombs used at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this was detonated in Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. And the radioactive material spread out across like it says 7 square kilometers. So whatever, okay. Look, I don't know why this book is using kilometers, okay. Anyway, of the Pacific region, okay. And especially some fishermen that were in the area were exposed to the radiation. They were out, the area was remote, but this fishing boat had been out there. The message had not gotten through, I guess, don't go out. And so some of these fishermen got sick. Okay, the Soviets test their first hydrogen device, thermonuclear device. So hydrogen bomb is based on thermonuclear technology, and the Soviets don't have a hydrogen bomb yet in 1954, but they do. They do test a thermonuclear device, so they're on the road to getting that hydrogen bomb. These horrifying, massive bombs that are much worse even than the horrific bombs of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay. So the U.S. still possesses the superior weaponry in 1954, but it's only a matter of time before the Soviets are going to catch up, okay? So this policy of massive retaliation is going to be, let's lean into this advantage, let's keep the advantage, let's keep developing this nuclear program. And this policy is articulated by the Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, who is kind of a well-connected guy. He was a New York lawyer. Look, a lot of the people in both the Truman and the Eisenhower administrations, they're part of what we call this establishment. They are part of, they're Ivy League educated. They're oftentimes bankers, investment people, or lawyers from New York or the Northeast. But it's a lot of the people in the same social circles in both administrations, the Truman and the Eisenhower administrations. And Dulles is one of these individuals. And his younger brother, Alan, is also the head of the CIA. So they have this kind of joint shared vision going forward under the Eisenhower administration. We're going to build up our security through strength in the nuclear program. And So he this new policy is announced in January of 1954, the same year. Okay, and the argument that's made is that the hallmarks of the Truman administration, so things like the Berlin Airlift or the Marshall Plan or the Korean War itself, they were responses to crisis. They were these like emergency efforts to respond to crises that had already like gotten underway. And so the idea was with massive retaliation, there would be a deterrent to action. So it's not just that you're responding, but you're preventing or you're convincing the Soviet Union and China to rethink any kind of act of aggression before they do it, because there was going to be the threat of massive retaliation. So that's kind of the idea behind it, right? And the policy is complemented in terms of the development of within the Air Force under General Curtis LeMay, who was this guy who brought the really brutal civilian bombing to Japan, and he'd also been doing it in Germany. Okay, and so he's really not worried about civilian casualties, at least in the context of World War II, didn't seem to bother him. Okay, so the Air Force is kind of improving its capacity to carry these weapons and drop them. But also what's being developed right now, and a lot of investment is going into, is the missile program, because they know that in the next few years these bombs are going to be put on missiles, so that you won't have to fly airplanes into enemy territory to drop the bombs. The missiles will take them there for you. And so Eisenhower knows that's coming, and they're investing in all of that. Okay, so Eisenhower is putting a lot of federal money into this. And the biggest single benefit company that benefits from that defense spending is General Motors. Okay, and really the extent and the danger of this situation, the extent of the acceleration of the arms race, is probably not really widely publicized in a way that it should have been. At least there should have been more awareness on the part of the public, probably, that what exactly was happening. Right? Okay.